There's this video came out, and this teacher was berating two children, saying that they were sort of basically bigots, and that it was terrible that they had their sort of what would be kind of called gender critical views or just common sense views. And she said their parents were bad and they should go to another school because at this school we believe in this. And the media have sold it as like, oh, this was a person that identified as a cat. And they've kind of taken it down that red herring, which is there was meant to be a student identified as a cat, and people say, no, there wasn't a student. Yes, there was. But the bigger point to me was always how ideologically captured the teacher was in that video, where she was telling the children off quite aggressively because they said, you can't be a cow. This is sort of not, there's only two sexes. And it just showed to me that people will just unthinkingly regurgitate this stuff. And it reminded me of the police when that policeman said he had to check someone's thinking because they'd liked a limerick about trans people that was maybe a bit sort of mocking it. And he said he'd done a course and that you can have like the brain of the other gender. Like, oh, you've done a course, have you? So one of the dangers is just people sort of unthinkingly taking this ideology on and not realizing that it's actually highly contentious.
No, completely. And these courses are, 10 a penny, and there's all sorts of wonderful quote unquote charities who are going to come and educate your workforce for a hefty sum on this stuff, and employers are happy to do it because it's a bit of a tick box exercise and it signals how virtuous they are. But I mean, yeah, going back to what you said about the teacher there, it's crazy because these vocations should be, ideologically, politically neutral anyway. So they certainly shouldn't be shutting down or trying to shame, young students because they dare to challenge or put forward different ways of thinking. But it's particularly concerning when, again, I come back to this idea that what we're dealing with is material reality. We sex is binary and immutable, and there is nothing to suggest that it isn't. And that is how we've operated in this universe since time immemorial. And it reflects the law of the land as well. And so it's utterly bizarre that students who stand up for that can be shamed in front of their classmates by teachers. I mean, and I don't know whether this particular student was identifying as a cat. I do know there's lots of students out there identifying as different animals and inanimate objects because I've seen them, I've watched their videos online, I've read their blog posts, so this people are getting bogged down as to whether this particular student was a cat or wasn't. It's that, for me, that's not the issue. The issue is the way in which this teacher was, as I said, effectively shutting down students who have genuine concerns about the impact of this ideology within their classroom.
Yeah, exactly. I felt very much the cat was a sort of misnomer. It was less important. People focus on that. Exactly, it was the shutting down of it was the teacher's attitude that was so terrifying. And then when you realise that must be the case in schools everywhere, in many places. And one slight left turn here, a question that's bothered me is why are the vast majority, or it seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like the vast majority of these transitions are male to female, or we did a story a few weeks ago on GB News about that, and it was, I can't remember the exact context, but it was like 97% of them, of the requests were going in that direction. Is that accurate?
It used to be. Historically, it was almost exclusively boys and men seeking to transition, but it's flipped now. There's a new phenomenon which has been entitled rapid onset gender dysphoria, and it's kind of pubescent adolescent girls now. And if we look at the statistics over who is presenting to the Tavistock over recent times and other gender clinics, the ratio is inverse, and it's more young teenage girls now that are seeking to transition, which brings up a question of why that is. And myself and others are arguing that it's partly on the basis of contagion. Gender dysphoria is a mental health condition. It is common for mental health conditions to pass between people via contagion, and particularly amongst girls, and particularly amongst young girls. And we've seen that with eating disorders and depressive tendencies. We've even seen it more recently with Tourette's syndrome. Historically, it was almost exclusively boys presenting with Tourette's. Again, now there's been a huge uplift in the number of girls presenting with it. So this is telling us something about what's going on in our society and also in our schools, because I'll hear of multiple girls coming out as trans in a single class.